Conducting insertion. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to discuss 3 aspects of insertion into a community. You should be able to describe 6 ways insertion can be enhanced. You should be able to relate your own experience of insertion and suggest ways of effective insertion. Let us begin with this exercise. Take a few seconds and look at that maze. Find out how you can get to the center of that maze. What did you realize in doing this exercise? There are 4 gates to access the maze, but only one gives you the possibility to reach the center. Along the way, you may find a dead end. However, if you entered through the right gate with constancy and systematic approach, you definitely can reach your destination. Seeing the map from different paths makes it possible to evaluate different paths rather than simply going by trial and error. The basic point is that unless you find the right entry, our work within the community towards social transformation will actually reach a dead end. So it's best to find the right entry. And it's good to find what we'll be terming as the generative theme, the issues that raise a lot of energy for the communities to begin acting on. And we ask ourselves, how many times have we observed passionate community workers toiling to help the community, but actually they have used a wrong entry and they end up being frustrated. And that's why insertion is very important, to really find out the right entry point. Insertion is done on 3 aspects. First, you have to do insertion in the community. You have to do insertion into a situation. You have to do insertion into an issue itself. And when we look at doing insertion to a community, we have to look at how do we get into the community. This requires becoming part of that community or group that the pastoral agent is actually working with. So a pastoral agent needs to create a rapport, needs to create a relationship with the community that they are working with. And the rapport is important because one gets to have a sense of belonging. One becomes in solidarity with the community at hand. 3 crucial aspects in entering a community are very important. 1 is building relationships in the community. 2 is trusting the people. Then the 3rd is really submerging ourselves into the realities of the people. And now let's look at building relationships. We need to learn to relate with others. And this requires a formal introduction of the pastoral agent into the community, clarifying their clear role in that community, their identity in that community. And this will facilitate healthy relationships and entering very well into the patterns of the community. Trusting and communion with the people. That's the second point. These are long-term goals that we need to build in terms of trusting and being in communion with the people. Submerged realities is another component really. In a pastoral perspective, getting into the community necessitates us to build solidarity with the marginalized. And that we need. We need to be in solidarity with those who are affected, those who are pushed to the margins. Precisely because of their condition of being at the margins, of being excluded, these people are not involved in the community dynamics, and we need to actually be in solidarity with them. And second is getting into a situation. Communities are dynamic and they evolve over time. Different concerns tend to follow one another. Pastoral agents are supposed to understand and engage them in their work. One of the entry points would be if there is a calamity taking place in the community. The attention and the emotional state of the public is really to respond to that issue. And in actual fact, that is a generative theme, because they are bringing about all the energies to actually solve that issue at hand. And getting into the issue itself, there is need to identify what major social issues the community is ready to do something about. Getting to the issue, once the entry point is identified, the next step is really getting a better grasp of it to get into the issue at stake. This can be done by getting exposure or contact with a lived experience and through research. Two issues are important when getting into the issue itself: waiting and listening. Generative themes. Waiting and listening, when we talk of waiting and listening, we are talking about actively listening to the community itself, observing what is happening and being attentive to the people and their reality, creating space for issues to emerge. Generative themes. As a general rule, it is better to start with the issue that raises a lot of energy, a sort of burning issue which motivates the community to act. In conclusion on insertion, we would like to say that direct contact with the issue is very important in order to get a grip of the reality. And this requires to be truly actively involved in the reality itself, to be affected by the things as they are. And it is not sufficient to remain at intellectual level only working with concepts. You need to dip yourself into the issue at hand. In other words, insertion here means to stick to the reality as it comes to us. Insertion is to let the issue affect us to the point that we may be called to change. We may be called to change our thinking, we may be called to change our position, and that may challenge our worldview, may challenge our lives. Are there any ways that can help us carry out insertion? Indeed, we have 6 ways that can help us to facilitate insertion. And the first is learning what is meaningful in the community. The second is learning something new at every time. The third is keeping track of information. Fourth, sharing information. And the fifth is active listening. And finally, you need to appreciate the community. Let's look at these 6 ways of carrying out insertion. Learning what is meaningful to the community. Learn what interests the community. Learn their hobbies. Learn their sports teams, their stories, their food, their music, their superstitions. This makes the community to feel valued. And if the outsider respects what they value, they will actually feel valued. Learn something new at every opportunity. Learn what interests the community at every encounter. This makes the community to open up to the outsiders and to share more about their culture and their issues in the community. Keep track. Create a process for keeping track of these important pieces of information. Keep track. Create rapport. Keeping track shows you value what has been shared. Sharing meaning information is also very important. Once the pastoral agents have known about the people's interests, they can share things with them. This shows the pastoral agent understands the community's interests and shows the interest to enrich them. And listening is very important. Listening is really crucial in insertion. When pastoral agents listen to the people, they build a relationship. And to the community, it shows that the pastoral agents are interested in what the community actually does. And appreciating the community. Appreciate the community in things that they do. Don't focus on the issues that are actually raising a lot of concerns. Appreciate the positive things that they do. Use appreciative inquiry rather than focusing on the problems or things that pastoral agents do not find appropriate. All these strategies aim at making the community to feel valued, respecting what the community value, immersing oneself appropriately in the community. To conclude, we have learned that insertion is very important in order to listen and understand what the community is experiencing. We have learned that insertion is immersing ourselves in the community. We have learned that insertion occurs at 3 different levels: at the community level, at the situation level, and inserting ourselves into the issue. Finally, we have learned ways that can facilitate insertion.